Deep within the shadowed underbelly of Okinawa, a chapter of World War II unfolds that clutches at the heart with icy fingers. A tale so drenched in sorrow and terror that it lingers like a perpetual ache in the soul, as American forces pierce the veil of those concealed passageways. The revelations they encountered shattered the boundaries of human endurance, evoking waves of pity and revulsion that time has scarcely dulled. Picture the anguish makeshift wards, where agony-racked soldiers whispered pleas for oblivion, trapped souls who faded into eternal night without a glimpse of the sky, and hollowed-out rooms where despair drove kin to embrace death rather than the unknown horrors of capitulation. These weren't mere caverns. They were sorrowful sepulchres, etched into the unyielding ground by hands trembling with fear and compulsion. As we delve into this poignant narrative, let your heart open to the forgotten voices of histories. Subscribe now to unearth more tales from the abyss of World War II, where the weight of buried anguish presses upon us all. When the Japanese High Command grasped the grim inevitability that Okinawa stood as the final sentinel guarding their sacred homeland, a profound desperation took root, compelling them to seek refuge in the very soil beneath their feet. The island's limestone, yielding yet resilient under the onslaught of shells, became their reluctant ally in a bid for survival. Commands echoed through the ranks: burrow into the earth, forge an impregnable bastion from the depths. It was a call that ensnared not just warriors but innocent schoolboys with soft hands unused to toil, mothers clutching infants to their breasts, and elders whose weary bones protested every swing of the tool. The air filled with the relentless clink of metal against stone, a mournful rhythm that mirrored the pounding dread in their chests. Sweat-soaked figures hauled away debris in woven baskets, their backs bending under the load, while others ferried precious water to quell the choking dust that invaded lungs and eyes, turning breaths into labored gasps of misery. Exhaustion claimed its victims without mercy. Some crumpled mid-stroke, their lifeless forms pulled aside like discarded burdens, replaced by fresh waves of the unwilling. These excavations birthed no simple refuges but intricate realms of warfare, labyrinthine networks born from the minds of engineers who dreamed in blueprints of defiance. Vast storerooms safeguarded munitions behind fortified barriers, nerve centers buzzed with the hum of communication lines, medical bays nestled in recessed alcoves, and sly bottlenecks crafted to ensnare invaders in lethal choke points. At the heart of it all loomed the subterranean citadel beneath Shuri Castle, a sprawling domain engineered to shelter multitudes, from whence directives flowed like poisoned veins, aiming to sap the invader's spirit through unyielding attrition. Yet, beyond the cold calculus of strategy, these burrows pulsed with raw, human torment, a suffocating veil of dread that wrapped around every soul within. The atmosphere grew thick and oppressive, lanterns flickering feebly against the encroaching gloom, silence heavy as a shroud, squeezing the breath from chests already tight with anxiety. Civilians, lured with promises of sanctuary, soon awoke to the bitter truth of their imprisonment, their hearts sinking with the realization that escape was a fleeting illusion. Warriors, hardened by duty, muttered curses at the sweltering confines, their resolve fraying, yet holding, buoyed by faith, in the protective embrace of rock. None could foresee the cruel irony. In sculpting these havens, they were unwittingly fashioning their own eternal resting places, dooming themselves to a fate intertwined with the cold, unfeeling earth. As April 1945 dawned and American boots touched Okinawan shores, the island had morphed into a deceptive maze of obscurity, each hidden recess brimming with unspoken agonies awaiting discovery. The assault commenced with a cataclysm of fury, naval behemoths unleashing barrages that scarred the coastline. Squadrons of planes, sowing destruction from above, the land convulsing in a symphony of explosions and despairing cries. Marines surged forward, hearts pounding with anticipation, only to confront an eerie void. Hamlets abandoned, fortifications unmanned, a hush that bred unease rather than relief. For a fleeting instant, hope flickered that the foe had withdrawn to the interior, but then the ground rebelled in vengeance. Artillery erupted from seemingly barren ridges, bullets hissed from fissures in the stone, decimating ranks in ambushes born of invisibility. The invaders reeled, their shock laced with a growing horror, as comprehension dawned. This war waged not upon the sunlit fields, but in the clandestine depths below. The tunnels had awakened, teeming with spectral defenders who struck like phantoms and vanished into the void. Dubbed rat holes in grim jest, the moniker belied their vast, insidious expanse. Karelas materialized from concealed portals, inflicting wounds with surgical malice before retreating into the abyss, leaving behind trails of blood and shattered morale. Hillsides, pacified at dawn, roared back to life by twilight, compelling the use of infernal weapons, flamethrowers spewing liquid hell, grenades shattering the quiet with bursts of shrapnel. Closing one ingress merely diverted the peril to another, a Sisyphean torment that gnawed at the soldier's sanity. Venturing inward transformed combat into a visceral nightmare, where light succumbed to impenetrable black. Echoes amplified gunfire into deafening roars, and acrid fumes poisoned every inhale. Veterans wept in recollection, likening it to battling within coffins, each bend a harbinger of doom, shadows pregnant with lethal intent. Their expectations of open skirmishes dissolved into this claustrophobic hell, facing an adversary as elusive as mist, while their own fears amplified with every hesitant step. For the assailants, progress exacted a toll of unrelenting dread. For the besieged, the tunnels morphed from bulwarks into snares, betraying the fragile hope they once inspired with a crushing inevitability. Okinawan non-combatants, far from finding solace, endured a captivity laced with profound sorrow. Shepherded into the gloom under martial decree, they clutched meager possessions, blankets worn thin by use, cherished mementos, heavy with sentiment, scraps of sustenance that mocked their hungerers. They descended into realms already reeking of exertion and despair. The illusion of safety shattered swiftly. Stagnant air bred illness. Waste accumulated in fetid pools. Freedom became a distant memory lost to sealed entrances. Mothers cradled their young, stifling sobs to preserve secrecy, as tremors from distant blasts dislodged grit that stung like accusations. Little ones, wide-eyed with confusion, etched pleas into the unforgiving walls. Their innocent scrawls, a heartbreaking testament to terror, murmured invocations blended with ragged breaths. A chorus of vulnerability that tugged at the heartstrings. The military's indifference amplified the misery provisions pilfered for the ranks, able-bodied conscripted, to extend the warrants, until flesh tore and spirits broke. Adolescent girls, barely on the cusp of womanhood, were thrust into roles of caregivers or messengers, navigating the oppressive corridors with trembling limbs, their youth stolen amid the chaos. Terror reigned supreme, a constant companion that eroded resolve. Allied pamphlets fluttered down like fragile hopes, offering mercy upon yield. Yet insidious whispers from commanders painted surrender as a gateway to unspeakable violations, igniting paranoia that clawed at minds. Parents, hearts heavy with love and fear, echoed these falsehoods, watching their offspring shrink in horror at the mere notion of the outside world. As deprivation deepened, water reduced to contaminated drips, nourishment rotting in the damp. Vermin feasting on the frailty, collective psyche fractured, hallucinations danced in the void, apparitions born of isolation, voices murmuring from nothingness, evoking a pity that wells up even now. Upon reaching these sanctums, liberators beheld not belligerents, but broken figures, emaciated and feral, their gazes piercing with a mix of relief and accusation that stirred profound empathy. What began as shelter devolved into a vortex of insanity, a poignant betrayal of trust that leaves one aching for the lost. Nowhere did the tunnel's brutality manifest more heartrendingly than in the improvised medical enclaves, caverns transformed into arenas of unmitigated suffering. Under the wavering glow of scarce illumination, healers toiled over blood-drenched litters, tools dulled by ceaseless demand, their faces etched with exhaustion and helplessness. Pain relievers vanished early, compelling operations amid raw screams that reverberated like accusations against the indifferent stone, piercing the soul with their desperation. Young aides, conscripted from classrooms into this inferno, faltered under the burden, their attire encrusted with the essence of agony, collapsing in heaps of sorrow. The ambience reeked of decaying infections, perspiration mingling with the haze from makeshift flames, sterilizing blades while insects buzzed relentlessly, burrowing into exposed vulnerabilities. Limbs severed in haste accumulated in grim mounds, the afflicted clutching explosives, their tear-streaked pleas for self-deliverance, evoking a deep well of compassion. Others intoned supplications, their fervent words swallowed by the cacophony of warfare above, hearts breaking in the isolation. The structures quaked with each assault, debris invading incisions like cruel intrusions. When intruders finally penetrated, battle-hardened eyes widened in disbelief at the macabre tableau. The departed intermingled with the barely alive, expressions locked in eternal torment. Journals, marred by crimson, chronicled futile appeals for aid, stirring a profound sadness for dreams unfulfilled. A soldier's haunting admission lingers. The vacant stares, dilated in perpetual shadow, imprinted on the mind like brands of grief. These weren't havens of healing, but abysses where compassion yielded to overwhelming war. The Thanos promise of safeguard, crumbling into galleries of exquisite pain. Those who emerged bore invisible wounds, their reticence a shield against recollections too raw, a silent cry that echoes through generations, as allied contingents infiltrated the deeper recesses. Anticipation of clashes gave way to discoveries that inflicted wounds upon the spirit, far eclipsing physical scars. Cautious advances, weapons poised, illuminated, forsaken relics headgear strewn about, vessels of hydration appended, ordnance arranged with meticulous care against weeping walls. But as beams pierced further, the veil lifted on atrocities that clutched at throats with revulsion, heaps of remains, swarming with life uninvited, assaulted senses. Elsewhere, clusters of self-inflicted ends, kin entwined in final, desperate unions, grenades frozen in grasp, evoking tears for the innocents extinguished. The olfactory assault proved unbearable, a miasma of putrefaction that infiltrated pores and memories, prompting wretches and silent vigils of incomprehension. Decades on, warriors confessed the subterranean horrors surpassed surface carnage. For foes above could be confronted, while below dwelled only spectral remnants, stirring a melancholic pity. In a forsaken ward, attendants' forms, rigid with congealed vita, bore witness to unwavering devotion amid apocalypse. Another vault revealed scorched relics, adhered to surfaces deliberate emulations, to evade disgrace, a choice born of utter desolation. Efforts to retrieve honored the fallen, yet instability condemned many to perpetual entombment, explosive seals echoing like final laments. To the intruders, the isle was already a furnace of torment. The underworld convinced them of a primal abyss where essence dissolved, leaving hearts heavy with sorrowful reflection. The chambers of collective demise unveiled the pinnacle of tragedy, where doctrine instilled terror of captivity, portraying adversaries as monsters devoid of mercy. Confined in obscurity, with sustenance waning, multitudes opted for oblivion, hearts pounding with resigned anguish. Guardians distributed instruments of end explosives for foes and self-toxins for swift departure, fostering a climate of inevitable grief. Upon revelation, scenes defied rational grasp. Kin arranged in mimicry of communion, ravaged by blasts, fragile forms cradled in larger, a tableau that wrenches the soul. Walls bore marks of intentional conflagrations, the scent of charred existence persisting, a haunting reminder of choices forged in panic. The hush amplified the horror, no defiance, merely the residue of manipulated dread, evoking empathy for the deceived. Survivors' hushed admissions paint vivid portraits of mutual urgings, maternal melodies soothing progeny moments before cataclysm, stirring profound sorrow for bonds severed. Liberators, stoic exteriors, cracking, grappled with visions of vulnerability extinguished, officers lamenting the indelible imprint of such fragility. Warfare had warped the innocent into pawns, lineages into sacrifices, grottos into mausoleums, a distortion that aches with injustice. Beneath Shuri's crumbled grandeur, emblem of ancestral pride, sprawled the apex of subterranean ingenuity, a command nexus burrowed into bedrock, corridors alive with connectivity, stratagems plotted on surfaces, quotas for repose amid turmoil. Leaders Matsuru Oshijima and Isamucho orchestrated from this veiled bastion, their edicts flowing through dimly lit paths where scribes toiled and couriers hurried, hearts fueled by unyielding loyalty. Weeks of aerial and artillery fury reduced the overlay to dust, yet subterranean resolve persisted, voices undeterred by the quakes. When breaches occurred in late May, the transformation stunned. Cartography besmirched with lifeblood, parchments incinerated in haste, transmissions fading into ether. The apex horror, the commander's ceremonial exits, forms composed in honor amid ruin, a poignant finale that evoked mixed reverence and pity. Intruders described an oppressive aura, not merely physical but emotional, laden with the gravity of conclusion. This layer transcended fortification. It symbolized indomitable zeal, each convolution resounding with mandates that doomed multitudes to oblivion, a legacy that tugs at conscience. The edifice above lay in fragments, but below throbbed recollections of a directive favoring extinction over yielding, a sorrowful testament to conviction's cost. Post-victory, The warrens defied closure, pockets of defiance persisting in isolation, surfacing under moon's veil to torment guardians' acts of forlorn zealotry. These weren't coordinated thrusts, but poignant finales. Warriors navigating constricted veins, discharging into void before withdrawal, or rigging perils with trembling resolve. Clearance operations bred claustrophobic dread, descents into uncertainty where proximity to peril chilled blood, infernos purged chambers, devouring breath and turning confines infernal, followed by lulls, shattered by sporadic fury, proving tenacity's endurance. Mental fractures afflicted all. Defenders, emaciated and unhinged, charging into demise with wails that pierced hearts, or lingering in mute vigil, preferring shadow's embrace. Confrontations evoked not triumph but haunting empathy. One recount of a gaunt sentinel, rifle gripped, gaze feral yet pleading, stirs deep compassion. Temporal extension amplified isolation. Even post-securement, echoes persisted, agrarian folk ambushed by phantoms of denial, instilling communal trepidation. For natives, these voids became spectral domains, shunned for apparitions and holdouts, a lingering grief that shadows existence. In these waning struggles, the burrows epitomized vain endeavor, pledging asylum yet yielding demise, a duality that weighs heavily on reflection for assailants delving, defenders enduring, innocence in the subterranean conflict's essence endured in obscurity. Battles unseen, yet profoundly felt. With cessation, the terrain scarred visibly, but profounder wounds festered below. Warrens gaped like wounds unhealed, many dynamited into oblivion, others yielding to nature's reclaim. Yet recollections clung tenaciously, warriors portraying depths as realms where humanity evaporated, haunted not by machinery but by fetid decay, pleas of the deluded, and earth's adversarial clutch, evoking eternal melancholy. For islanders, these sites morphed into shrines of lament, kin returning with heavy hearts, probing thresholds for vestiges of vanished loved ones, offerings laid with tears as proxies for interment. Some recoiled, daunted by spectral murmurs, weeps, footfalls, infantile cries, whether ethereal or mnemonic, they chilled spines. Contemporary endeavors, unearthed fragments, Azia's testimonies, artifacts whispering of interrupted lives' insignia, safeguards, devotional items, juvenile evoking poignant narratives of eclipse. Catalogued remnants number over 1,000, yet multitudes slumber undisturbed, a silent multitude beseeching remembrance. The tunnel's inheritance is choose valor for anguish, encapsulating edict's toll, deception's venom, and entrapment's plight. Gazing upon verdant portals today invokes shivers, awareness of subterranean chronicles sculpted by despair but devoured by demise, revelations within transcended shock, unveiling war's erosion of essence. A cautionary echo that when terror and dogma propel into depths, emergence yields not vitality but hush. Beneath Okinawa's veil, in those inky veins, resides a verity that petrifies in conflict. Terrain transmutes to vault, and certain terrors persist unending.